Shalom, friends. Welcome back. We're located on the Judean mountains, uh, quite close to Jerusalem. And today's teaching is going to be about the roads leading up to Jerusalem. To understand this, you have to understand where is Jerusalem, where it's located. Well, Jerusalem lies upon the northern part of the Judean mountains, kind of like in the center of Israel. Northern part, right in the center. And to reach Jerusalem, well, you had a few options depending where you lived. If you're down south, let's say in the desert area, Beersheba, or upon the Judean mountains, but southern from here, let's say Hebron or Bethlehem, well, you walk upon the Judean mountains to Jerusalem from south to north. If you're at the western side, you could walk up from the shoreline up to Jerusalem. If you're up north, you could go upon the mountains. Let's say if you're around the Jezreel Valley, walk upon the mountains of Samaria, and from Samaria to Jerusalem. And if you're at the eastern side, eastern border of Israel, well, you could, of course, come up from Jericho from the eastern side. Saying that, most people preferred coming from the eastern side. Why? Because it was kind of a ceremony, a ceremonial walk, journey to the house of God. But when would all of that happen? In the high holidays of Pesach, Passover, of Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks, you guys know it as Pentecost, and third, in Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles. But of course, if something happened, if you felt obligated, obliged to come to Jerusalem and give a gift to God, well, you would come and visit the temple. And as you would come to Jerusalem, you would come for that purpose exactly, to connect with God. But not only connection with God, as giving Him an offering, also you would come for redemption. Because the only way back then in the days when the temples exist, first and second temple, the only way to redeem yourself with sin would be by giving a sacrificial animal as a sacrifice, and then with the shedding of the blood, you would be redeemed by God. So the Jews, 3 times a year, would choose to come, most of them, not all of them, from the eastern side. And from the moment they left their homes, the ceremony started. They would walk along the eastern border until they would reach Jericho. So the preferred road would be coming from the north through the eastern border of Israel back then in the days as well as today. And it would take them from Galilee all the way to Jerusalem, something like 7 to 8 days. They would walk along the eastern border until they would reach Jericho. Jericho, right behind me over there, this is the farming area, the agriculture area of Jericho, all around it, very fertile, very good. And they would be so happy. So happy, finally they're almost here. From here, from Jericho, all the way up the mountains of Samaria and Judea to Jerusalem, it would take them about 10 hours of light, something like a day walking up the mountain. After their journey, they would be so happy. Finally, we're almost here. Hallelujah. We're going to connect to the Lord. Soon enough, we're going to be at the house of God. We're ascending toward Jerusalem. But as they were filled with happiness and joy, they would also fear, knowing that this portion of walking would be a dangerous one. You see, they would take with them money, coins. In Jerusalem, you would buy the sacrificial animal. The animal had to be without blemish. It's written in the scriptures. So the journey of 7 days with a goat or some sort of other sacrificial animal, that would be a bit dangerous for it. It could get injured or attacked by other animals along the way. Buy it in Jerusalem. When everybody's buying their sacrificial animal, that means it costs a bit more expensive. They would need money, half a shekel coin, to enter the temple. That was the currency of the temple, and money to spend, money to stay there. So their pockets would be filled with coins. Heading up the mountain, which would be a winding road, and the thieves, the bandits, knew it. And they would be waiting there for them for an opportunity to come. So the road heading up to Jerusalem would be a dangerous one, and the people that would be filled with joy also would be filled with fear, knowing that they could trust only one, and that is God. And heading up to Jerusalem, ascending to Jerusalem, it doesn't matter where you are around the world. You could be on Mount Everest. When you talk about heading to Jerusalem, you're always ascending to the high grounds, to the house of God. And over here, around here, is also where some of the songs of ascent were written. I mean, you could look at the mountains, the pilgrims looking at them, Yeshua and his disciples looking at them, knowing that there's danger around there, and the only one that they could trust is the Lord himself. Try to think of Psalm 121. I mean, it comes to life right over here. So, as the people would arrive to Jericho, which is way down below by the Jordan Valley area, they would start ascending from around minus 250 meters below sea level, around 750 feet below sea level, to 750 meters above sea level, which is around 2,250 feet above sea level, something like that. They would ascend, and they would ascend and walk through a convenient valley area over here, just down below. The road down below is windy, and when I say road, I talk about a valley area, a natural valley area that has water, that has vegetation and shade. But with all that goodness, it would still be dangerous because of the bandits and thieves that would lie here and wait for the groups to come, to jump on them, and then steal from their goods, from their money. And that's why this valley over here received its infamous name. Some people even believe that this is the valley of the shadow of death that we read about in Scripture, Psalm 23, for instance. The distance from down below, from Jericho, all the way up to Jerusalem, its length is about 20 kilometers. That is about 12.4 miles. And as we said, a day of walking, 10 hours of sunlight. It would start from Jericho down below in this winding road. And then at a certain point over there, there would be a separation. And that's where we're heading to right now. So we were in the Wadi Qelt area. As we said, some believe it's the valley of the shadow of death. And from there, the pilgrims would not continue with that valley, but head toward the west, where we are now. We're at a mosaic museum that is known today as the Good Samaritan Inn Museum. You see, in the first century BC, Herod the Great built here a small fortress, as well as in Jericho, to protect the people walking up to Jerusalem from Jerusalem down. And it could be that here, where there was a small fortress, there was also a small inn. Now, I know that this is a parable, but Yeshua, Jesus, used ideas or areas that people knew of to make the parable, to make the story as realistic as possible. And using the valley, having such an infamous name, knowing that it's so dangerous, it was perfect for the story. As the person was attacked in the valley area, and the Good Samaritan, eventually him and only him, brought him to an inn that perhaps existed nearby. But where would an inn exist in this area where the valley would be so dangerous? By a watchtower, by a fortress. Now, the remainings of the fortress is so small. But what we know is that in the 6th century, in the Byzantine period, after Christianity, of course, became legal, they built here a monastery. And that's what we see all around us around here. This is the monastery from the 6th century, the Good Samaritan Inn monastery. Later on in the medieval period, there was no monastery, but there was a big fortress, again, protecting people heading up to Jerusalem, to Quds, and walking back down. Now, from here, there were two roads heading up to Jerusalem, the northern one and the southern one. The northern one was the more ancient road. It was an easier road to take. And that's why the Romans chose it to build their road heading up to Jerusalem. Now, the Romans, what went through their mind is to make it as moderate, less steep as possible, an easy road for their military, for there were military roads and administrative roads heading up to Jerusalem. And this is the route that they took back then. But there was also another road, the southern road. And that road would be a bit more difficult, more windy, steeper, heading all the way up to the Mount of Olives. And we believe that that was the road that the pilgrims chose to take. By the way, the southern road, the more difficult road, that was the road that we used in our time for the last few hundred years until the main, more modern road was paved heading up to Jerusalem today. Yeah, not in the Roman time, not in the Byzantine time, but today. But a few hundred years before that, up until just 50 years ago, the road that we took would be a bit southern from here, kind of like the ancient road that the pilgrims used. Now, the road that they used was a ceremonial road, meaning from the moment they left their homes until they reached Jerusalem, they were in the state of mind that we have to ascend to Jerusalem. And it didn't matter that the road was windy and more steep. That's what they were looking for. You would work hard, you would sweat until eventually you would reach the house of God. And as they would take the road and pray and rehearse the Psalms, they would pass by two villages. One of the villages is a village called Betania. Yeah, today it's called El Azariah. You guys know it, where Yeshua raised Lazarus. And the other village was named Bet Pagi. The main witness, or the information that we have concerning the southern road that people took in ancient times, it's from the New Testament, from Yeshua, as it's written in Mark 11:1, or in Matthew 21:1, or in Luke 19:29. Yeshua would pass through these villages up to Jerusalem. Now, Beit Pagi is also mentioned and described by early Jewish rabbis, by the sages of the Mishnah and the Talmud. And it's mentioned as a community, a village, a town that had close relations with Jerusalem and with the temple. Maybe it was also a community, a place where the priest used to dwell in. And there is also rabbis that say, or they raise the idea that in Bet Pagi is where they used to make the showbread for the temple itself. And probably Bet Pagi was very close to Jerusalem and on the ceremonial road leading up to Jerusalem. Probably there were pilgrims that would lead the priest, bring the showbread all the way to Jerusalem. And as they would arrive to the Mount of Olives, that would be the first time that they would see Jerusalem. They would go down the mount to the Kidron Valley and perhaps also meet other pilgrims that would come from different directions. But the entrance into Jerusalem would be from the south as well. From the south, where the pool of Siloam is, they would enter and then continue to ascend inside the city until eventually they would reach the temple. So it's all about the journey. It's all about ascending. It's all about finally reaching the house of God and connecting. Folks, be blessed and shalom. Until next time, I hope you enjoyed it.